Hey everyone. Hi, I'm Heather Moran, and I'm the CEO here at 6th and I. Well, thank you. Whether you're here with us in person or watching virtually from home, on behalf of us at 6th and I and our partner Politics and Prose, thank you so much for being with us tonight and for your support of a nonprofit and an independent bookstore. Stacey Abrams is a personal hero of mine, as I'm sure she is for many of you. But I will tell you that someone on the 6th and I staff bought me this Stacey Abrams action figure, and I look at it every day for inspiration. So believe me when I tell you, it is my sincere honor to welcome her back to 6th and I. Tonight, we're also officially inducting her into our Three Timers Club, which is a small group of authors, thought leaders, and entertainers who have graciously returned to our stage to share their wisdom and talents. And we also have a Five Timers Club, so we've got our eyes on her for that. There is so much to say about Stacey Abrams, so I will keep it to just some of her greatest hits. Ms. Abrams is a trailblazing political leader and voting rights advocate. She served 11 years in the Georgia House of Representatives, 7 of those as a minority leader, and was the first Black woman to become the gubernatorial nominee for a major party in U.S. history. She has launched multiple organizations devoted to voting rights and tackling social and economic issues at the state and national levels. Ms. Abrams is an educator and currently serves as the Ronald W. Walters Endowed Chair for Race and Black Politics at Howard University. She is the host of the Crooked Media podcast Assembly Required, where she offers tools for grassroots change and progress. And Ms. Abrams is also a storyteller with 17 books to her credit, spanning political thrillers, romance, leadership, civic engagement, and children's books. And tonight, we're here to celebrate the release of Coded Justice, the third in her best-selling series of legal thrillers about Avery Keene, a former Supreme Court clerk turned corporate investigator who steps into the world of AI in the medical industry. The book raises questions that so easily relate to our own lives about technology, ethics, and justice. Stacey Abrams will discuss this and more in conversation with Dr. Carla Hayden. Dr. Hayden most recently served as the 14th Librarian of Congress. Dr. Hayden was nominated to the position by President Obama and is the first woman and the first African American to have led the library. During her tenure, she prioritized efforts to make the library more accessible to the public. She shared many of the library's treasures, from Frederick Douglass's papers to the contents of President Lincoln's pockets on the night of his assassination, and I know you know what else I'm gonna say, to James Madison's crystal flute, famously showcased by Lizzo. We are deeply, deeply grateful to Dr. Hayden for her service, and we consider her to be a national treasure. Thank you again, both here and at home, for being with us tonight, and please help me give a warm welcome to Stacey Abrams and Dr. Carla Hayden.
I'm going to put your stuff down for a second. I'm going to have you put your stuff down. So these folks are about to irritate each other with these phones, and they're mostly taking pictures of you. I just happen to be here. So we're going to start over here, and we're going to look at this group and let them take pictures. And then we're going to do all these sections, and then people are going to put their phones in their
they're
laps.
up there
Yeah, they're there too. So come on, come on. Hi. Hello.
Oh my goodness.
This is really awkward, but it's effective.
It's nice though.
Yeah.
You know, this is my first, I was telling you, this is my first time in DC.
Yeah. Okay, let's look up there for those guys. Hi. Hi. This is like Sears Portrait Studio. Yay. Okay, 3, 2. Okay, you're doing a video. Okay, here we go.
You're
Okay.
good at this. It's like American Idol or
It is.
something, isn't it? Oh.
I was going to go with top model, but somebody here says I'm too short for that, so
We
I
know
see you,
who.
Tijuana. Okay, in 5, 4,
Oh,
3.
up there too.
Oh, no, we got to finish down here. Okay, somebody is taking a really long time to focus.
That
And
happens.
we're done, and up there. Hi. Okay, you've got to do this awkward smile for a few more minutes.
And then again.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, hold on. Wait, no, they're still waiting. Okay, and 3, 2, you got to sit down so I know you understand numbers. There you go, 1. Okay, here we go. Hi. As we look towards the center, as though we're looking at everyone at the same time.
Okay. I got it
There
now.
you go. Just as you figure it out, you realize.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm finally like,
Okay,
come on,
and
I'm a
5,
deer in the headlights.
4, 3, 2, 2.
Who was
1.
that?
The one back there trying to
Okay.
steal our souls with her camera.
Okay.
Up here. Hi.
Oh.
Okay. Jackie is like, you were not supposed to do this. You're taking up your time. And we're done. Thank you.
I mean, you know, my first question was also asked by one of the audience members, Aaron,
Okay.
and it was about, how do you do all of this? You're a social justice advocate, all of the things that they said, and now you're an accomplished author. How do you find the time? How do you do all this?
So I don't know ever how to answer that question. So I just tell people the architecture I use. But before I do that, it is such an honor to be here with you.
Oh,
It really is.
no.
And I say this with great respect for where I am. I'm a bit verklempt.
Well, your mom is a librarian, though.
Yes. So when I was growing up, my mom once teased, or she wasn't teasing me, she was telling me, she said, you don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. What she was telling me was, pick something, Stacey, you're doing too much. What I heard was, try everything. So lesson 1, communication is key. But for me, there's a quadrant system that Dwight Eisenhower used. And he said there are things that are important and urgent, things that are important but not urgent, things that are urgent but not important, and things that are neither urgent nor important. And I organize my life so that I spend some time in all of those quadrants. I spend the least amount of time in urgent but not important, because usually that's because somebody else made a mistake and they want me to fix it. But it consumes so much of our lives because we think, because we feel busy that we're doing something. And I learned early on that I wasn't going to spend my time there. I spend a lot of my time in the important and urgent, saving democracy, making sure we can vote.
Thank you.
Writing for me is important, and depending on whether my contract is up, urgent. But usually it's just important because it's important to me to be able to tell stories, to think about issues, and what weaves through all the work that I do is storytelling, because whether you're trying to pass a bill or start an organization or convince someone that their right to vote is real, that's all about storytelling. It's about how do you help someone see more than they imagine. And that is very important to me, and sometimes it shifts from important, but not urgent, to important and urgent. But I think the part that confuses people is that I believe in spending a lot of time in not important and not urgent, because that's where you get restoration. And for a lot of us, we burn out because we're so busy either in important and urgent or urgent but not important, and it crowds out everything else. And so I just try to live a 4-quadrant life, and I'm very lucky to have people who support me. I'm grateful to have been privileged to try different things. And the last thing is I don't really mind failing, so I'm willing to do things that other people probably don't give themselves permission to do, because what's the worst that can happen? I've publicly failed really big times, so I'm good. I'm okay.
I'm learning.
Yeah. I would not call what happened to you failure. I would, except a failure of morality, intellect, ethic, and intention. But other than that.
Oh. Thank you. I wish my mom could hear that, but she'll be listening.
I'll
Don't
tell
worry.
Miss Colleen.
Tell Miss Colleen.
It.
Well, I mentioned that your mom's librarian and books were so important in your life. When did the writing start, though? When did you make that switch?
So my mother is a librarian. She's also she's a retired Methodist minister. My dad is also a retired pastor. But when I was growing up, my mom was a librarian and my dad was a shipyard worker. We grew up surrounded by books. In fact, my mom had her library. She's a college librarian. We would go to preschool at the library, but when preschool was over, her job wasn't. So we would sleep in the stacks. I would nap surrounded by books. It was fantastic. And we grew up with my mom reading to us all the time, and she would read very broadly. She did not constrain us to a certain type of story to understand. My dad is dyslexic. And my parents grew up in Jim Crow South in Mississippi in the 1950s. So my father was never diagnosed as dyslexic. He really learned to read most functionally when he was in his 30s by reading to my youngest sister. But my dad loved storytelling. And so for my parents, I grew up with my mom reading to us everything, and my dad telling us these wild, fantastical stories. I'm the second of 6 kids, and he would have to weave a Friday night bedtime story that pleased all of us. It was like the most G-rated version of Game of Thrones ever. And I loved the act of telling stories. But when you're a kid, if you tell a story out loud, you're a liar. If you write it down, you're an author. And so I learned to write my stories down.
So do you remember when you started really writing?
I was very young. I learned to read very young. My older sister taught me because she was tired of reading to me. And then I learned to write. The first time I attempted a novel, I was actually 12. It was called A Diary of Angst. There was a boy. He was mean to me. He did not realize what a jewel I was, and I was confused as well. And so I wrote this. It was. I was very impressed with it.
Do you still have it?
My mom actually had it bound for me when I was 25 and gave it back to me. It was very sweet. I think it was also a little bit of a nudge, because I'm like a 12-year-old with angst. What is that? But
you knew the word.
I did, and I had the whole motif about angst and how the diary. Anyway, I will never show it to anyone else. But
there are archivists out there that can't wait.
But yes, I don't remember not writing. I love the act of being able to tell a story, but also the alignment of words. So I wrote poetry, I've written plays. I had a brief phase when I thought I could write country music.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, I had this great lyric. I've had my heart run over again and again by too many tractors masquerading as men.
Oh, that's great!
I did that when I was in 10th grade, and I was teaching myself.
That was 10th grade?
It was 10th grade. Well, so I used to listen. I had a friend. I grew up in Mississippi. I had a friend who said something about country music. I was like, oh, I hate country music. And she looked at me. She was like, why? And then I didn't have an answer. And I realized it was just something I thought I should say. And so I made myself listen to every station on the radio for 2 weeks. And it turns out I love country music.
Stories.
I also love Reba McEntire. And I thought I could write music. I cannot.
But your
but
lyrics.
I was good with lyrics, and so yes, that was my ode to another boy who upset me. So yeah.
And then you went on to write romance
I
novels.
did.
So let's
Because real guys.
bring that in too. 'Cause
So I sound terrible. I really am good. I'm okay at dating. I'm not good at it, but
there's a
so-
theme here.
well. So my first romance novel was it was called Rules of Engagement. It's based on my ex-boyfriend's dissertation. He was a chemical physicist. I once thought I was going to be a physicist. Turns out I just like Star Trek. But he sent me, we'd broken up years before. He sent me his dissertation because I was like one of a handful of people who was in his program who would read it. And he discovered this chemical, or the properties of a chemical called microzeolites. And I read the dissertation. I'm like, oh, this is fascinating. And I was doing work in environmental justice. And I was thinking, you guys are an easy audience. I was concerned about the fact that we were telling, this is the late 90s, we were telling developing nations that they had to speed through the process that developed nations got to meander through. When they were engaged in environmental degradation, they got to take all the time in the world, and we were telling these developing countries, you've got to fix everything now, even though you don't have the resources, and we exploited you to make this happen. And the microzeolite technology, basically it's a chemical that can interact with other chemicals without reaction. Derek used it to light computer screens or something like that. He used it for inert gases. But I was like, what if you could use it to actually absorb chemicals in the air? And then what if it fell into the wrong hands and it could be used as a chemical weapon that had a larger dispersal pattern than anything we've seen before? And so I called him. I was very excited. And I tell him this idea I have based on his dissertation. And his response is, that can't happen, Stacey. That's ridiculous. And I'm like, this is why we broke up. You have no imagination. And he mocked me. And I decided, one, I was going to write the book. A bit of a journey because I couldn't write it as a spy novel because in the late 90s, publishers didn't believe that women wrote or read espionage. And I was like, I know I've read Women Spies, and that was in romance, and also General Hospital. And so I made my spies fall in love, killed the same number of people, wrote the same story, and I thought, this is a way for people who don't necessarily think about microzeolites or environmental justice to enter my world with me. And because Derek was mean about the book, he's in prison in it for the rest of his life.
That's a good way to get back, isn't it?
We're friends again now, but yes.
I would see. So then, okay, so you did the, and Selena.
Selena Montgomery.
Montgomery, and then there was that shift.
So, started with Selena Montgomery in part because at the same time I was a third year in law school. So I wrote my first novel I finished my first novel in law school. And at the same time, anyway.
I know, I'm like, wow.
So at the same time, I'm a tax attorney by training. And I was writing this all sounds really obnoxious when you say it out loud. So I was doing my master's degree, my law degree, I was doing tax policy, and I wrote a paper on the operational dissonance of the unrelated business income tax exemption, which I'm sure all of you have read. And that you stay up at night trying to find more people to talk to you about the UBIT. And so I finished both my novel and my paper, and the Yale Law and Policy Review was going to publish my paper on tax policy, and Arabesque was going to publish my novel, and Google was born. And I looked up, a friend of mine called and said, Stacey, put your name to this thing called Google. I'm like, it sounds like you're having a stroke. What are you talking about? And he's like, go to your computer. And 3 days later, when it started up, I was able to put it in there. And I've written a lot. So when I was in high school, when I thought I was going to be a physicist, I'd written a paper on Mesopotamian astronomy that got picked up by a college journal. And so I was in the Journal of the Astronomical Society of the Atlantic, which I didn't think anybody knew, but Google knew. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me that if Google could find that paper, there was no way I could write romance as Stacey Abrams and tax policy as Stacey Abrams. No one was going to read tax policy or read romance by Alan Greenspan. And so one of my names had to change. You can write romance under pseudonym. You cannot write tax policy under pseudonym. And so Selena Montgomery was born. She published 8 novels. My name is in all of them. My picture's on all of them. I've never been ashamed. I love the fact that I got to be a romance writer for so long. But around 2010, some stuff started happening. I had become minority leader in the General Assembly. We were in our nadir as a party, which might sound familiar to some folks, and I had to focus my attention on rebuilding the party. And so I left romance behind, but started working on my very first Avery Keene novel, and there you go.
Wow. Well, speaking of Avery Keene,
Yes.
there were times that I had to wonder, and I'm going to just ask you, because it's described in the book. You're a damn good lawyer who can ferret through reams of information and spot issues others might miss. Is that you?
I will say, if you grow up with a research librarian as your mother, who, when you have, you know this, if you ask a question and they say, go look it up, you can't say, I can't look it up. I learned to read fast. I learned to look for patterns and find information. And I'm just nosy. I'm very curious. I also do a lot of stuff, so I've had to learn how to sift through information. Certainly when I was in the legislature, one of my skills was that I was really good at reading all the bills and sort of spotting things that maybe others may have missed, in part because, again, just to reveal just how deep a nerd I am, like, I read the Code of Georgia. Don't ever do that. But I'm like, if I'm going to be a state legislator, I need to know how each of these new laws we're writing fit in. And so I read the code. And so every time I would read a bill, part of my challenge was I would think, okay, this bill connects to this law that currently exists. And there's a young woman in the audience, Sharon Wood, who knows that this is what I do, because she and her best friend used to mock me at the legislature all the time. No, they're wonderful people. But part of it for me is that, and I wanted Avery to have a similar skill, because a lot of what we care about, they're not writing new things. They're remixing what we already have and making it worse. Or what they do, this is actually something I learned from reading Robert Caro's treatise on Robert Moses, the power broker. Like, this is a man who basically built himself into power by inserting different lines into legislation. He made himself one of the most powerful people in America, because he put himself, he created, the New York Authority, and then he created the New Jersey Authority, and he said that the person who was in charge of the New Jersey Authority had to be the person in charge of the New York Authority, and then he put something into another bill that said that you can only fire this person if this third person did it, and he made himself that person too. He did it over a course of years, but what it revealed to me long before I stood for public office, it was that if you read the law, it's not enough to know the words. You've got to know the context, you've got to know the history, and you have to know the intent. And what would happen too often, and thank you, what happens too often is that we get so fascinated and fixated on the words in front of us, we forget about the words that were already there. So if we bring it to present day, what is happening in this intentional, authoritative, and speedy dismantling of our democracy, they don't have to write new rules. They just had to read the rules they've been writing and knit together the story they want to tell. And so for me, it's an incredibly important skill to have, that we not just look at the words. I mean, you know this more than anyone. It's not just the word, it's the context. And out of context or with bad intent, words can do extraordinary damage or create incredible good. It just depends on the user.
Now, the other 2 books both had justice in the title, and this one does too. And another theme that runs through is the balance with ethics.
Yes.
Speak on that.
So Avery was born, again, I started writing her story 2008, 2009. I'd left the law firm where I was a tax attorney. I'd moved over to become deputy city attorney, and then left that to become a state legislator. My mother called it my trajectory of downward economic mobility. My dad just smiled, but but there was a lawyer at Sutherland, the firm I worked at. Her name was Teresa Wynn Roseborough, and she was the first black woman to be a partner in a major firm in Atlanta. She was just an extraordinary woman, and she would feed me, basically, because I was making less and less money. So every so often, she'd invite me to come back to the law firm so I could see what I'd left behind and lost, and bemoan my fate. And we were having lunch one day, and she said, "Stacey, have you thought about the fact that Article 2 of the Constitution does not provide for a Supreme Court justice completely incapable of doing the job?" And I was like, no, that had never occurred to me. And she said, think about it. Article 1, if there's a congressperson who is unable to do their job, they can be fired. You basically just don't reelect them. If it's a president, you've got the 25th Amendment. But short of impeachment, you cannot remove a federal judge except for high crimes, misdemeanor, or death. And I started thinking, what are the ethical implications of a Supreme Court justice who is inert to the world, but essential to the administration of justice? And Howard Wynn was born and quickly goes into a coma. It happens in the first chapter, so I'm not revealing anything. But the point was, I needed a character who had to navigate that ethics and justice often sit side by side, but they're not the same thing. And that sometimes to get to justice, you have to understand what your ethics are, and that we use these words interchangeably, we use these constructs interchangeably, they are not. And that sometimes there are ethical conundrums that have to be met to get to justice. And so the main character in While Justice Sleeps, or Justice Wynn, he has to navigate from a coma a question of ethics so he can mete out justice. And I wanted Avery to be the person who had to do it because I wanted a foil for the story who had responsibility but no power. We often think of heroes as people who, either are, thrust into, big moments, or it's foisted upon them. And I wanted her to decide, because part of ethical decision-making is deciding to do something. It's not if you don't have a choice, it's not a decision. And it feels good, and it's a great story device. But I wanted a character who had to make an affirmative decision to do right, make an affirmative decision to pursue justice. And in all of her successive stories, it's been about how do we make our choices when we have responsibility but no authority, where we have responsibility but no power. Because too often we use the lack of authority or the lack of power to exempt us from action and to justify our inattention. And I want Avery to have to always confront, what does it mean to have to decide to do right and do good at the same time?
And then with Rogue Justice,
Yes.
she continues on.
She does.
And then now with Coded Justice, the big AI.
Yes.
And what was interesting about the series, and I asked you this before we came on, how did you know that AI was going to be it? And this is almost a textbook. I just have to say, if you don't know about AI, you want to know, read this book. You explain it so well.
Thank you. So I'll bless you. So when I wrote While Justice Sleeps, it was at the advent of CRISPR. We were just starting to map the human genome. We were just starting to think about what it meant to use biogenetics as a weapon. I wrote it back in 2009, 2010. I also had a president who was involved in international intrigue and a Supreme Court that was split and not always making the best decisions. And when I wrote the book, I was told by publishers nobody was going to read it because no one cares about genetics unless you're, Michael Crichton, and that no president would get involved in that kind of international intrigue at that level, and that nobody was interested in the Supreme Court. fast forward to 2020, and suddenly my book sold. I was very proud. When I wrote Rogue Justice, I wanted to talk about the FISA court, because we have this court that has unfettered power to surveil Americans, and we don't really know what they have to present to make it so. I wanted to understand the power grid, because Texas and California seemed to be confused about what that was supposed to be, and I wanted to write about cryptocurrency. So that was Rogue Justice. I try to think about what are the things that I wish I knew more about, that as a matter of policy, we are adopting but not investigating, or we've just gotten used to it existing. And then how do you take something that feels too complicated and make it accessible to people who are not going to do the kind of research I'm willing to do because I am a nerd? And so when it came to AI, my niece Faith, who lived with me, my parents and my niece lived with me for several years, she was in high school, and she came home one day, and she was doing a report using ChatGPT. And I saw it. I'm like, Faith, how is that not cheating? And she was like, it's not cheating because I was told to do it. Like, they told you to cheat? like, I don't understand. Like, I remember when I had to do research, I had to get microfiche. Like, this was not fair. And she explained it to me. She was explaining why ChatGPT made sense, and it occurred to me that the 16-year-old knew something that I didn't and was comfortable with the technology that I just did not get. And there is nothing more discomforting than a teenager who can lord it over you. And so I started thinking, what do I need to know about AI? And then I was at a conference listening to the titans of AI talk about the technologies they were creating. And there was both a brilliance and a complete disconnection from human context that was very jarring to me. And so I took it upon myself. I thought, AI is going to be around for a while. And the more I listened and thought about it, the more I realized how pervasive it is, that we don't notice how deeply embedded in our lives it is. And because it's so embedded, but because it also feels so both abstract and so complicated, we just accept it. It's like we accept planes. Nobody knows how a plane really, okay, some people do. But we get on planes and we go into the air and we glide along until we drop. But if you ask someone to explain aerodynamics to you, most people can't. Well, AI is the aerodynamics of our lives, because it is everywhere and it touches everything, and most of us are either unaware of it or just mildly afraid of it, but the convenience is so great we're not going to ask too many questions. And I think that's the danger. AI is the most powerful technology the world has ever devised. And there are too many of us who feel unworthy of understanding it or feel that it's too hard to learn. And so I wanted Avery to have to understand it, which meant that I spent a lot of time reading lots and lots of books on AI and doing a short course on MIT's website. Look, I can't code, but I can now appreciate coders better. I listened to a lot of podcasts about it, and I did a lot of research. For a while, it looked like an image from Beautiful Mind. I had all these things around my room, around my office, like explaining my algorithms and how can you use AI to detect disease. And the whole point of the book is for us to understand that AI is complicated, it is powerful, but it is also understandable. You don't have to be able to build it to know what it can do. And if we aren't comfortable with the language, then the people who are will lord it over us and will change our lives without us even noticing. And that's why coded justice is so important to me.
It is almost like a course on AI with thrillers and murder.
I figure if you kill a few people while you're teaching
Yeah,
someone,
and you get into...
It makes it easier.
But it really... you look up words like, what was that one I was asking?
So I talk about sentience in the context of artificial general intelligence, basically whether or not we're building HAL, if you remember 2001: The Space Odyssey, or my personal favorite, Data, although Data's less AI. Well, Data uses AI as part of its processing system, but anyway. There's a nerd here who's about to be like, Data is not AI, but yes, he is. Okay. But yeah, sentience. I mean, basically what we're afraid of, what we're being taught to focus on is the sentience capacity of AI. We're not near that. Where I'm concerned is that all of the steps in between are what we should really be focused on. Because by the time AI is sentient, it's game over. It's a question of what are we conceding and what are we not seeing in the interregnum. Like, raise your hand if I came to you and said right now, as the government, I want you to give me your thumbprint, I want you to give me your fingerprints, your iris scans, and the permission to use your face anytime I want it. Raise your hand if you would say yes to that right now. Okay, now raise your hand if you have clear, pre-check, or have been through TSA. Exactly. When it's the government asking for it for no good reason, we are deeply suspicious. But in order to avoid taking off our shoes, we gave the government access to all of that information. And the reason that information is useful is because of AI. If you have ever, used Uber to buy food or to go somewhere, you have given AI the ability to track you, to track what you eat, to track what you like. And then if you knit that together with where you like to stay when you go to Las Vegas and where you stay when you tell people you're going to Las Vegas, all of that information is scrapable about you. And then AI is all about pattern recognition. It's about scraping data, collecting it, and then mapping out patterns and predicting. That's what AI does, only it does it at a scale and at a speed that baffles the mind. But it is incredibly practical, and it is why we have just watched the theft of our information from our government databases through Doge and Palantir and others scraping data about us, not because it's for our safety, but because in the 21st century, currency is not money, currency is data. And if you cannot control your data, whoever controls that data controls the future and has access to the next round and the next round and the next round of progress, but also the next round and the next round of oppression and of monetization. And so I talk about all that in 400 and some pages.
And very clearly, because I had to look it up. Sentiient. And I finally said, look it up. 'Cause, you're pretending like you know what that is. But let's go on. It's self-awareness.
It is.
And AGI is artificial general intelligence. Yep. That's the future, you say.
Yes.
Why is it? What do you mean self-awareness?
So the worry is that AI is going to be so smart it doesn't need us anymore and therefore gets rid of us. That's the specter of AGI, that artificial general intelligence is that we are no longer programming AI. AI can program itself. AI has sentience and self-awareness and the capacity for thought and reasoning. There was a paper that Apple published recently that explains we're not quite there yet. Right now, you have large language models, LLMs. So ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, those are Perplexity, those are LLMs. And they basically do pattern recognition. They don't think, they just process really fast and recognize patterns. Then you have reasoning models. They don't really reason. They do a better job of creating logic systems, but it turns out they're not that good at it. Because according to this paper from Apple, the LLMs, so the ChatGPTs, bless you.
Sorry.
You're fine. The ChatGPTs, they do okay with logic puzzles. But the reasoning models, the more complex models that do more architecture, their architecture is different and they're supposed to be reasoning, they're bad at it because they overthink it. They're okay with sort of medium puzzles, but they can't do really complicated puzzles. And that's because they can't actually think. And this isn't the question you asked, but it's an important segue that I'm going to leverage because I feel like it. And that is, we are anthropomorphizing AI today. If you think about 2 weeks ago when Grok decided to go full Nazi, the stories were Grok apologized. Grok is a tool. Grok didn't apologize for it. Grok, it does not exist, does not have sentience. The people who programmed it let the guardrails fall, and it was trained on a large language model known as X that was allowed to become a cesspool of racism and bigotry and misogyny, and you insert invective there. And when it taught itself when it scraped that data, it decided it was Hitler, okay? When Grok apologized, that was an attempt for us to start believing in sentience and self-awareness. It was a distraction. Grok didn't do a thing. Developers did. XAI did. Elon Musk did. When Anthropic's Claude model, when Claude decided to blackmail its developers, the story is told as though Claude was and it's an LLM, that Claude kind of woke up and wrote and cut out little images from a magazine and pasted on a piece of paper to blackmail. What it did was it used its coding to, based on how it was being coded, it sent back basically, this would be my reaction to this set of patterns. And we talk about Claude as though Claude did it. No, the developers in Anthropic who built Claude, the engineers, the data scientists, they're responsible. The issue is whether we let ourselves be lulled into a belief that there's this third party called AI that's out there thinking, that has general intelligence, that has sentience, or whether we recognize that it's a tool being manipulated by others who are abdicating responsibility, so much so that they tried to sneak into a mega bill that's going to destroy society anyway, the ability to have a moratorium on regulation for a decade. That's what they're trying to do. And just this week, the president issued an executive order that he did not write and probably could not explain, that says that AI cannot use ideology or DEI. Essentially what they're saying is you can't build AI to be responsive to most human need. Because if you do not think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, how are you going to solve for the problems that come from trying to help all people, dealing with the inequities that we have, and force inclusion and respect for all? And again, it's not doing it, the developers are doing it, the owners are doing it, the data scientists are doing it, or not doing it. And our responsibility is to say that if you're going to take our data, you owe us the guardrails, you owe us the intentionality, you owe us the respect of algorithmic justice that sees us and serves all of us and not just your bottom line.
And the book that you read that really delves into it by
Joy
Dr.
Buolamwini. It's called, yes, she's amazing. So I read 3 books for this. The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleyman, who created DeepMind. Unmasking AI by Joy Buolamwini, who really, she was the one who coined the term algorithmic justice. And it was one of the precepts behind the book. The reason I wanted Coded Justice to be an AI model that touched on healthcare for veterans, and the 3rd book that I used was The AI Revolution in Medicine by Peter Lee, is that we are all surrounded by AI every day. We know how healthcare could be benefited by better efficiency and having technology speed along our survival. But veterans are the most complex population of required service that we have in healthcare. And we fail our veterans every single day. We do. And so I wanted to take the most sympathetic population we should have, people who literally sacrifice themselves for us and are left to fend for themselves when they get back. I wanted to juxtapose that with an AI model that's designed to help them. But I wanted to explore, what does it mean when the people who are designing it have to design it from the space of having lived in our, they're humans. We are embedded and we have bias. We have to be intentional about understanding those biases, and you can't just will them away. And so part of the premise of Coded Justice is not that you have evil AI, but you have AI of good intent, but with ambition, avarice, and the complexity of humanity all wrapped into one, and again, somebody dies. So.
A few people
A few people die, yes. I don't want to give it away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, there's a
Seed
body
dog,
count.
but it's okay. So with your exploration, though, you do bring in and explain how there's that connection with medical care. And you get really into the bias in medical care, period.
Absolutely. So my father had prostate cancer in 2007, 2008. He went into remission, and his doctor in Mississippi was monitoring him because once you've had prostate cancer, you're supposed to be monitored. And every appointment, he would give my dad a clean bill of health, and my mom started going to some of the appointments because my mom was noticing symptoms that she thought were reminiscent of when he had it before. And it turns out that the doctor who was trained had not been trained to understand that black men do not have the same level of PSA, their PSA levels don't rise at the same rate that white men face. And therefore, he had not only come out of remission, he had metastasized. And my mom caught it in enough time that she was able to call me, and I was able to get them into a hospital in Georgia, and we were able to help my dad. But the reality is, that is not about woke ideology, unless being awake means that you are awake to the fact that people are different, that there are genetic differences, there are environmental differences, there are changes that happen, that women are different than men. And I know that's completely confusing to a whole host of people. But that means that medical care has to be reflective of the populations we have. And so this book really looks at, for example, I use a scene where one of the diagnoses is based on where someone was deployed, because you have different pathogens depending on where someone was deployed and what they could have encountered. AI could be an extraordinary tool for veterans if we could track their military deployments and when they got the flu, when they were in Fallujah, how were they treated, and what does that mean 10 years on when we suddenly realize there's some connection between something that happened then and something that happened now. So AI could be an extraordinary way to save lives, but we can't ask those questions if we cannot use DEI to understand the complexity of the people we're serving.
And so when you bring all of that together, you still have the strong story
Thank you.
and a little romance,
Of course. Always.
But-
Selena will always be with me.
and it makes you wonder, though, because you have almost foretold some of the issues, even some of the characters. You're reading it and saying, oh. What are you thinking next? What is it that worries you that you think you need to look into and we need to be ready?
Okay, so right now I really am worried about democracy.
Well,
No, but okay, so I mean, I'm always worried about that. But recently I did this 10 steps to autocracy. And it was, thank you, based on a framework developed by Dr. Kim Sheppel, who's a professor at Princeton University. And in it, I talk about the fact that the slide into autocracy does not happen randomly. There are steps that every single autocrat that began as the head of a democracy and wound up, lording over an autocracy, they follow the same script. It's not it's sequential for a bit, but you can always wash, rinse, and repeat if you didn't get it all right the first time. And it starts with you get elected. We have elections. The days of coups d'etats to take over democracy, that's passé now. Now you win an election, you just make sure it's the last one. The second thing that happens is that the executive expands his power because it is almost always a man. He expands his power beyond what we understand to be the norms and beyond what we think the plain language says, and that goes back to context. The third thing you do is that you take the competing powers in a democracy, which tend to be a legislative and a judicial power, you take those powers and you either make them complicit in your autocracy or you neuter them. And so we're watching at the lower court level the neutering of our judiciary, and at the Supreme Court level a complicit engagement and suborning of the destruction of democracy. And you've got a Congress that basically only serves the will of the strong man, and unless, of course, they're afraid and they have to run home. And then you move to step 4, which is that you break government. You fire everyone who knows how to do things. You eliminate one of the smartest women who can help us understand our world. And you do that because if you can break government, people start to forget why democracy matters. Democracy is messy. It is uneven. It is hard. It is the fact that I am willing to sublimate my needs, some of my needs, in order to serve some of yours, because together we get more of what we need overall. But if you can fracture that equation, if you can break that contract by firing the person who decides to make sure that the knowledge we have is accessible to the people who need to see it. If you can fire the person who used to tell us when storms were coming. If you can shut down public parks so that when wildfires start, there's no one there to see it. If you can get rid of the people who used to answer the phone at the Social Security office and replace it with an AI chatbot that goes in circles, knowing that the average age of the person calling that community does not understand that they're not talking to a real person, and they get so frustrated they hang up and forget to call back or cannot navigate the system that you've now created. You break government so people forget why democracy makes sense. Then you go to step 5, where you decide to ensure that the loyalists that you've hired, that you've put in the positions of power, that they make sure it stays broken. And it stays broken because they're not loyal to an ideology or a party, they're loyal to a person. And therefore, everything they do is about serving that strong man. Step 6, you break information. You defund PBS and NPR. You sue CBS and ABC, and they pay up. You fire the people who are telling the truth, and you create a propaganda machine that becomes an echo chamber that then tells only what you want the truth to sound like, even though everyone knows it's not so. Step 7 is DEI. You have to blame someone for all the things that are wrong. And since you've broken everything and you've got loyalists instead of experts doing everything, when you no longer have a CDC that can tell us about diseases, it's got to be someone's fault. So you blame immigrants, you blame transgender children, you blame black and brown people, you blame every vulnerable or marginalized community, because if you can blame them, you don't have to have responsibility. That is why among the first executive orders issued were executive orders dismantling DEI, because if you can sublimate and suppress the communities that have the most to lose, if you can shut them down, then no one's going to fight you, because everyone else has got what they need. And just in case, you go to step 8. And at step 8, you sue universities so that they can't teach us what we are entitled to know. You go after law firms to make sure they don't fight to protect civil society. You swear that you're going to dismantle philanthropies, and you haul them before Congress to accuse them of doing things like good. And you do everything you can to make protests seem not just implausible, but dangerous. And that leads to step 9, which is the step where we decide that suborning private violence is an answer. And you see the rise of political violence. You have masked men who call themselves ICE agents, who are secret police, who are on the streets and make it seem okay that we put aside our humanity because of a lack of paperwork, and we kidnap people off the streets. We invade foster care communities. We do what we want because we no longer have standards that we hold ourselves to. And if you've done those steps, when you get to step 10, that's when you start to make sure there are no new elections. So you redraw the line so you can hold on to Congress and not have to fight. You purge 478,000 voters in the state of Georgia. You do what you can to break democracy, and you pass the SAVE Act so that anyone you didn't get through those other steps can't show up to vote. Those are the 10 steps to autocracy. Those are the 10 steps that we have. And for me, the responsibility is for us to know why they're doing it and to understand that their activities depend on our compliance. It depends on our numbness. It depends on us being so overwhelmed by the sheer scale of what they're doing, we have no choice but to give in. And for me, the responsibility we have is to say no. We refuse to give in, we refuse to be complicit, and we will fight back to save our democracy. And then I'm vaguely certain I answered your question, but I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah. And that book again. Tell us that you want the book about the 10.
Oh, no, that was just me. So, no. So Kim Sheppel, who is a professor at Princeton, she did we were on a presentation together, and she did this presentation. I was like, oh, I love that. I've appropriated some of her things, remixed it a bit, editorialized it a lot. So what I say, I said. I'm not attributing it to her at all. And I've done enough work on authoritarianism myself that it was a really great frame, and I've appropriated it, but I always give her credit, unless she doesn't want it, in which case it's my fault.
Well, you laid it out. So the next Avery book?
Yeah, I was trying to avoid answering that question, but thank you for bringing it back up.
Oh, no. I'm a librarian.
I know. So I will say this. I am looking at autocracy. Avery has both national and international opponents. So if you've read the first two books, she has been involved in international intrigue herself. Book 2 was one of my favorite anti-heroes. Hayden Burgess is her Moriarty. And so I'm trying to figure out in book 4 who she's fighting. But really, for me, it is going to come down to a conversation about we took for granted until this year how government works. We took for granted the permanence of democracy in our nation. We cannot do that any longer. My challenge over the next few months is to figure out what's the point of entry, and as soon as I figure it out, I'll write it down and you guys can read it.
Well, we were able to have questions from the audience.
Hit me.
Okay. And Aaron was one of the first that wanted to know how you do all of this stuff. And I think you just touched on it some, but Jonathan wanted to know, your novel tackles the high-stakes intersection of AI, healthcare, and ethics. In blending fiction with timely, real-world concerns, what responsibilities do you believe storytellers have in shaping public understanding and awareness?
It's a terrible description, but I try to make sure we get broccoli with our ice cream. No one would ever eat that, but...
No.
But I think storytellers, as I said at the beginning, storytelling is the most effective way to engage not just the mind, but the heart. When you get raw information, it's there, but you don't have context, you don't have texture. Storytelling is a very important way of bringing those in. And storytelling doesn't mean fiction. It means being able to weave together protagonist, antagonist, knowledge, and wisdom with information. And effective storytellers, irrespective of media, know how to do that, or they try their best. I can hand you a list of AI terms, and it will mean nothing to you. But if I have you thinking about the last time you let Alexa figure something out for you and now you're worried, I've done my job. And more importantly, the next time you go to the doctor and they ask you to repeat something and you think, well, why couldn't you just record that? I want you to consider what would it mean if that's what they decide to do. And you may choose for that to be the answer, but I want it to be a choice. I don't want it to be a default because it's just what we're used to. And so I think storytellers have the responsibility to give you different examples of what could be, to give you alternative realities, but to also help you map out how you want to engage and intersect. It's up to you to do with it what you will, but it's up to the storyteller to give you enough information to make all of us a little more dangerous.
And so Elizabeth, though, wanted to know, while you're doing all this stuff, what's your preferred creative writing environment? Do you go to music, snacks, what?
Oh, when I'm writing?
Listed it, yeah.
Oh, no.
How do you?
So I'm usually trying to get to a deadline, and I've got a few other things that are sitting there looking at me too. But basically, I will map out the number of days it's going to take me to write. I will lie to myself for about 10 of those days. So I build in days where I'm like, I don't feel like it, or I don't know what's happening, or I don't want to. But I usually have a cup of tea if I'm doing it early in the morning, and I believe in Cheetos, but it's hard to type with Cheetos.
Snacks.
It really is. And I usually will give myself the reward of something I'm one of the reasons the New York Times is now a mobile gaming company. So I have my sequence of things I have to do in the morning. I won't do my order because someone's going to fight me. But I go through my order of games, and if I haven't written the night before, or if I miss one of my deadlines, I'm not allowed to do it until I do my writing. And then I can go back and figure out which spelling bee word I haven't gotten yet. So.
You answered that one.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I noticed that Avery was good at poker
Yes.
and chess. You?
I am okay at chess. I'm good. I understand chess. I'm good at it. I don't play people who are really, really great at it. I could never make money the way she does. I am better at spades and blackjack than I am at poker. And I did, however, during college, I made a little bit of spending money playing spades at Morehouse. So I went to Spelman. Boys don't think you know how to play cards, and I don't talk trash. So I would just sit there quietly. I had a partner who talked a lot of trash, and we then took all of their money. It was a lot of fun.
Well, now this is getting into civic engagement.
Yes.
Elizabeth wanted to know, how can individuals who care about the future of our democracy contribute and make it better?
So I want us to, the reason I lay out the 10 steps is not to terrify us. It's to give us understanding. And the reason I give the examples is that it's easy to hear autocracy, fascism, authoritarianism, but to contextualize it and to see what it feels like in real life is hard. But it's also, if you know what the problem is, it's a lot easier to solve it. And we spend so much of our time imagining disaster, practicing disaster, that we forget to prepare and to solve for it. And so the way I put it is, Everything Everywhere All at Once is a fantastic title for a movie. It is a terrible mission statement. But we can all do something somewhere soon. And so our first job is to figure out the thing that we care about. If we think about those 10 steps, figure out which step bothers you the most. For a lot of it, it's embodied in step 4. When they break government, that means somebody is not getting what they need. We can't make government better right now. We cannot force people who've literally written a 900-page treatise on how they plan to dismantle democracy and how government serves us. We cannot force them to do the right thing. A lot of folks are trying, but we can't individually do that. But what we can do is mitigate the harm. And we underestimate how much mitigation can actually provide. Because when you think about the last election, 77 million people voted for him, 75 million voted for her, 90 million people didn't think their voices mattered. And often those are people who didn't feel served by anyone. Those are the folks that need to see us right now. Those are the folks who don't care about autocracy because they're so busy dealing with despair that autocracy is a luxury. Us showing up at a food bank, showing up at a school, even if you don't have kids in that school, reading to those kids. If you care about immigration, find an immigration organization that you can volunteer for. But figure out what wakes you up at night or won't let you sleep, and make that the thing you do. And just do it once a week. But don't try to solve everything unless you run an organization or you're a philanthropist. If you can't do everything, find the something you can do. So identify the thing you can do, and then bring someone with you to do it with you. Not the person who's your running buddy on everything, but the person who doesn't think they can do anything. There is nothing that is more infectious than helping someone. People rarely start, but it's hard for them to stop. And so bring someone with you to do that. And then 3, talk about it. Those who do not share our value systems are rarely silent about it. They will say it over and over again until it sounds like it's the right thing. Those of us who have a shared value system, we whisper it to each other, but we're afraid to crow it. But how do people know what we believe if we don't say it? And we, for the moment, live in a democracy where that's our right. So don't just do things. It's not about asking for credit. It's about building community. And community is built when people see that other people share their values, share their intentions, share their pain. So know what you want to do something, Bring someone with you, and then talk about it so that we know that we're not in this alone. The more of us who are talking about doing right, the more right feels like the right thing to do. That's our mission.
And it sort of relates to what Sabrina wanted to know. What were the top 3 elements to your success in increasing the number of registered voters in Georgia in 2020? What did you do?
So started in 2014. No, we pretend that we have these cinematic moments where we see the end, but there was a lot of work that had to go into that. And I didn't start it. I happened to have a role in it because of the work that I did with voter registration. But I've created multiple organizations. I created a voter registration organization, a voter protection organization. I created a census organization because you don't get to vote unless we know the number of people. And so we worked on increasing the census participation. I also created a policy organization because what's the point of voting if you don't know what they're going to do with the power you give them? And so I try to think holistically. But the 3 things are, 1, ask people what they need. We often start with lecture instead of listening. But if you ask someone, what do you need? What are you afraid of? What's hurt? When they tell you, that's the point of entry to convince them to start thinking about voting. And that's why it's so important that we prove that democracy can deliver. It's why it's so critical that step 4 not be able to overwhelm us. When people see that there is a benefit to their participation, then they are more likely to believe you when you come and say, if you vote with me, things will get better. And so we've got to first ask people, what do you need? The second is that we cannot chastise them for not having done it before. What's past is past. I can't go, I've been working on telepathy and time machines, bad at both of them. And absent those 2 things, what I can do is say, what can I do with you to make sure the next time something happens, you're there with me? And that's part of it. We cannot show up when we need someone. We have to show up when they need us. The challenge right now is that when you only show up when it's time for someone to cast a vote, you are hectoring them into doing something for you because they've not seen anyone do something for them. And our third responsibility, and this is the most important, is that after it's done, show up again. Because if it feels like a transaction and they feel like they're on the losing side, you're done. If it's a relationship, they'll forgive you if it doesn't work out, and they'll try again.
Well, this is getting back to your other part. Libby said, a guy on a dating app berated me for listing, quote, dismantling the patriarchy as one of my interests. Obviously, I told him to kick rocks. Do you have any dating advice? And tell me about kick rocks, too.
Look, I make up my guys. No, it's hard. I would say you want to have a little allure with your honesty, so maybe not dismantling the patriarchy on the first date. But no, we should never hide who we are, but we should create space for people to be who they need to be. Again, this is all theoretical. But I think what is most important is that when you are dating and when you're trying to attract a mate, our first responsibility is to figure out who we want to be with that person. We spend a lot of time trying to imagine who that person is. We don't spend as much time figuring out who we are. And we then end up, a lot of people are with somebody else's spouse or someone else's significant other because we spend our time trying to make ourselves into who we think that person wants as opposed to being who we are so that they want us. That's harder. And that's why I write about it instead of doing it all the time. But I think I'm right, and I invite all of you to prove me right by sending people my way, so thank you. I prefer, no.
Yeah, well,
anyway.
EJ also wanted to get a little more personal, but not that.
How much more?
Well, no, this isn't, well, we'll see.
Okay.
At the end of your podcast interview with Rachel Maddow, you mentioned that she had given you 7 things to consider. Can you share one of them?
Oh, some things I want to do with her. So I
To
think,
consider.
Yeah. So if you listen to Simply Required, which all of you should do, it's available wherever you get your podcast. We had this really fantastic conversation about autocracy. She's a fantastic writer, and in addition to being an extraordinary host and just a thoughtful person, there was one of the stories that she tells about Huey Long has always fascinated me. I'm from the South, and so I would love to do a graphic novel about Huey Long. I've not pitched it to Rachel, so if she's watching C-SPAN, hi, Rachel. But that's one of the 7 things I was thinking about, was doing a graphic novel, because in the moment where what we understand about populism and autocrats is so dark, Huey Long tried to leverage his power for good, still did terrible, horrible things, but he also brought education and transportation and electricity and economic freedom to thousands of people in a state that was often forgotten, and he became a roadmap for a lot of leaders in the South, good and bad. State capture bad, helping lift people up good. And I think his story has gotten lost to time, but the power of what he was able to construct for the amount of time he was a leader in Louisiana should be both a clarion call for what we are capable of doing when government does its job, and a warning, just a flashing warning of what happens when we concentrate both power and messianic intention into certain people. And so I would love to bring Huey Long into the 21st century, because we need to know him, we need to know what he did, and we need to be ready to make sure after this one gets out of the White House, we don't do it again.
Well, and I hate to...
Can I ask you a question?
Well, wait a minute. Oh, well, wait, because
Okay.
I wanted to end on this
Yes,
one because
okay,
it's
fine.
hope.
Yes, ma'am.
Corrine wanted to know, what gives you hope for our country? We've heard a lot of, but what gives you hope in your...
So I talk about my nieces and nephews a lot. So I have 6 nieces and nephews: Jordan, Faith, Ryan, Aaron, Cameron, and Devin. And they are the first generation since Reconstruction to lose civil rights. Just think about that. I come from the first generation in our family to be born with all of the civil rights of being an American. And in a generation, they've lost it. What gives me hope is that they don't believe that it's permanently gone. They believe they are entitled to everything, because my parents, my mother's father was born 25 years after the end of slavery. And within a generation or two, his granddaughter became the first black woman to be the nominee for governor in a state that once would have enslaved him. My nieces and nephews will exist in a time with the most perfect access to information in human history, with the most diverse population in human memory, and with a sense of wonder and entitlement to be a part of the future that no one else had. And my responsibility is to make sure my hope for them becomes a hope that they hold, but also becomes manifest in who they become, and that's what gives me hope and wakes me up.
Well, don't have time for your question.
Nicely
See,
done.
I learned from
nicely done.
Avery, but I just want to thank you for everyone. I know you want to thank her too. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, look. Look, no.